Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're going to unpack a universal human struggle that pretty much all of us face, but we rarely talk about it openly. I'm talking about that exhausting, endless loop of overthinking our social interactions. If you've ever replayed a totally minor conversation in your head for days, or changed your outfit 3 times just because you were worried about what a random stranger might think, well, you know exactly what I'm talking about. We're going to break down the psychological, the sociological, and even the philosophical roots of this whole phenomenon. And more importantly, we'll look at some really solid, evidence-based ways to finally break free from it. All right, let's dive right in.
Okay, picture this. You walk into a room and suddenly, boom, a harsh, glaring spotlight clicks on and follows your every move. It illuminates every little flaw, every awkward pause, every drop of sweat. Ask yourself right now, are you actually constantly being watched? Or does it just feel that way? That overwhelming feeling of being scrutinized in your everyday life is incredibly common. But as you'll see, it's actually a really powerful trick of the mind. All right, let's start with section 1, the illusion of the spotlight.
So psychologists like Thomas Gilovich have a name for this. They call it the spotlight effect. It's basically our drastic overestimation of how much people are actually noticing us. See, because you and I are the center of our own individual worlds, we naturally, but completely falsely, assume we're also the center of everyone else's world. We honestly think our bad hair day or that kind of awkward thing we just said is headlining the evening news in everyone else's minds. But the liberating truth? Everyone else is literally way too busy starring in their own movie to obsess over your little cameo in it. Now, you might be wondering, why on earth do we do this? Well, it's not because we're just hopelessly vain. It's actually a deeply rooted evolutionary survival instinct. Tens of thousands of years ago, group inclusion literally meant surviving woolly mammoths and saber-toothed tigers. Getting left behind by your tribe didn't just mean you had a bruised ego or you had to eat lunch alone. It meant you were out in the cold and, well, you were probably going to be lunch for a hungry predator. So this fear of other people's opinions, it's really just an ancient biological imperative trying its absolute best to keep you safe in the modern world.
Moving right along to section 2, mirrors and the gaze.
So there's this existentialist philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre, and he warned us about a concept he called the gaze. He argued that the exact moment we realize we're being observed by someone else, the other, it creates this completely unequal power dynamic. We suddenly become an object in their world, and that severely restricts our own authentic freedom. Just think about this in the context of today's social media culture. Every single time we post, we're voluntarily subjecting ourselves to the gaze. We're trading away our authentic freedom just for the currency of likes and external validation.
And this philosophical idea, it actually maps onto a real sociological framework. Back in 1902, Charles Horton Cooley introduced this idea called the looking glass self, and it happens in 3 distinct steps. First, we imagine how we appear to others. Second, we imagine their judgment of that appearance. And third, we experience an emotional reaction to it, like pride or profound shame. Notice the word imagine there. We don't actually react to what people think of us. We react to what we think they think of us. Our self-esteem is precariously built entirely out of mirrors reflecting imagined judgments. It's wild.
Which brings us to an absolutely crucial comparison. The psychologist Michael J. Formica points out the difference between our ego self and our authentic self. The ego self is super fragile. It's an exterior social mask that is constantly looking outward for approval, basically terrified of Sartre's gauze. But your authentic self? That's interior. It's grounded, it's self-accepting, and it already possesses inherent value. When we obsess over that looking glass, we're basically feeding the ego and completely starving the authentic self. All right, let's dive into section 3, when fear becomes trauma. Now, here's something really important to understand. Sometimes people-pleasing isn't just a quirky personality trait. It's actually a subconscious survival strategy known as fawning. You've heard of fight, flight, and freeze, right? Well, fawning is a trauma response, often rooted in emotional neglect or inconsistent caregiving when we were kids. A person fawns by just appeasing others to minimize conflict and hold on to relationships, even when it comes at a massive personal cost to their own boundaries. It is literally the ultimate, most exhausting form of wearing that exterior social mask. So what's happening in the brain here? If we look at the mechanics of severe social anxiety,
Dr. Michael Otto's cognitive behavioral model shows us how amplifying cognitions act exactly like a magnifying glass in your mind. It literally tricks your brain into turning a tiny 2-second conversational pause or a minor mistake into this catastrophic feeling of failure and shame. A tiny error suddenly becomes absolute, undeniable proof that you're totally inept. A drop of sweat becomes proof that you're defective. Your mind takes the minor and just blows it up into the monumental. And that magnifying glass, it locks us into a nasty trap. Let's trace how this self-perpetuating cycle of social anxiety works. It always starts with negative expectations, which naturally leads to apprehension. Then you detect a minor error. The magnifying glass blows it way out of proportion, and you feel this intense sense of perceived failure. So, what's our natural response to that? Avoidance. You bail on the party, or you use a safety behavior like completely avoiding eye contact. But here's the catch. Escaping only gives you short-term relief. In the long term, it totally prevents you from learning that the situation was actually safe all along. By running away, you're just locking the fear in deeper and confirming your own negative expectations. Okay, let's get to the good stuff. Section 4, Strategies for Authentic Freedom. So how do we actually break out of this? Here's a really actionable roadmap pulling from cognitive behavioral therapy and Stoic philosophy. First up, practice cognitive restructuring. Treat your fearful thoughts like they're just hypotheses, not cold, hard facts. Test them out. Second, intentionally drop those safety behaviors. Stop staring at your phone at a party just to look busy. Face the social friction without hiding so you can actively prove your worst fears wrong. Third, try interoceptive exposure. That basically means practicing just sitting with the physical sensations of anxiety without running away from them. And finally, embrace Stoic acceptance. Like the ancient Stoics remind us, you literally cannot control the opinions of others. You can only control your own reactions. It's time to stop outsourcing your self-worth to the chaotic, unpredictable minds of absolute strangers. I want you to really let this quote from Michael J. Formica sink in. He says, "We've been disapproving of ourselves our entire lives without much success. Why not start approving of ourselves and see how that works out?" It is so remarkably simple, but profoundly true. True self-approval doesn't come from finally figuring out how to get everyone else to like you. It comes from the radical realization that you are already enough, entirely independent of that imaginary looking glass. So, what does this all mean for us? We've talked about the evolutionary fears, Sartre's gaze, the very real trauma of fawning, and those CBT cycles that lock us away. But the key to this invisible prison, it's literally right there in your hand. So, I want to leave you with one final, provocative thought. If you aren't the socially anxious character performing for the imagined judgments of a crowd, who are you when you realize the spotlight was never real? Step out of the looking glass, reclaim your authentic life, and definitely let us know what you discover.